Hey guys, welcome to Your Story Weekender. Today we have a very special guest with us, Srishti Chaudhary, who is an author based in Delhi. She has launched her second book called Lalan Sweets. Last year, she published her first book, Once Upon a Curfew. So, Srishti, it's great to have you on the show with us. Thanks a lot for joining us. How are you?
Thank you. I'm very happy to be here. We just had a storm out here and it's been raining like mad, so I feel happy to be cozy inside and speak like this.
Great. So, Srishti, why don't I just let you give us a brief outline of what your recent book is all about?
Yeah, sure. My recent book, which is my second fiction novel, is called Lalan Sweets. Uh, it's set in 1995, the nostalgia of the 90s.
Yeah.
It's set in a small town called Siaka, and it's about a sweets shop where the sweets are made from a secret magic ingredient. And it's the story of Tara Taneja, whose grandfather, Lalaji, owns this shop. Now, Lalaji is the only person who knows what the secret ingredient is. And now he wants to relax and retire. And he calls upon his three grandchildren, Tara, Rohit, and Mohit, and devises for them a quest that they should set off on this quest, which will lead them to the magic ingredient. And of course, Tara has help from her longtime BFF and neighbor, Nikku Sabharwal. And yeah, this quest takes them to like different places, dangers, secrets, and the end goal is to find the secret ingredient.
And that's actually quite an interesting point, that you brought up nostalgia, right? So I think growing up in the 90s, there must have been some very significant and impactful memories that all of us would have had while we grew up. So nostalgia, and what are some of the other themes, like nostalgia, that this book has in it?
Well, there's obviously living in the 90s, as you said, nostalgia. Then, of course, it's a romance book, so there's a lot of like love brewing between Nikku and Tara, who have had this chemistry ever since they've been growing up. But Tara has another boyfriend now. He's called DJ Buddy, and he's the coolest DJ in town. He has the coolest haircut in town. There's obviously the issue of family and inheritance and what family means to you. And of course, the jewel on the crown is the secret ingredient. And it's one of those traditions, legacies, you could say, that one generation passes down to another. And just the whole theme of earning what comes to you and not just being handed out
Sure.
what might be your inheritance.
So yeah, in a way, it's about like building your own identity as well, right?
Yeah, it's a coming of age sort of
Hmm.
story.
So why did you pick, these particular themes? Why family? Why nostalgia?
These are things that are there in everyone's life in some way or the other. I mean, it's obviously about food. It's about a sweet shop, and in the shop, the laddus are made from a secret ingredient. Food, family, love, all these things are sort of themes which are there in everyone's life, and I feel like people connect to them really easily. I've been
Yeah.
getting messages from people saying, hey, thanks for writing this. It took me back to this time where I used to live with my drinku mosi, or I used to like go out and play with my friends, and there's a lot of like coco or and like all this stuff that you the things that you did in your past, but you don't actively remember them because you're going out for your job, or you have like things to do, you have your boyfriends or husbands, and you don't remember your childhood actively all the time. But then when you do think back on it, you always think, wow, I had a great childhood. These were such simple times that we didn't have tabs or computers, and we had this easy life where things were less complicated. And yeah, this book does go back to this time because I also wanted to actively remember it and
Hmm.
somehow commit it to my own memory. And this was my attempt at capturing this time in my life. which I seem to have forgotten.
So, Srishti, a little bit more about the setting of the story itself. How did you actually interweave the plot that you had in mind with the kind of setting that you just described?
So this book, Lalan Sweets, it's set in Siaka. Now, Siaka is obviously a fictional town. There's no place
In North
called
India, right?
Siaka. Yes, in the north. I wouldn't say where, but in my head, this town is a mixture of Pondicherry and Chandigarh. It's got the size of Pondicherry, but it's got the vibe of Chandigarh. It's like chiller and how Punjabi people are. And this, like, I wanted to represent small town life, but I've never lived in a small town, so I knew that I
Okay.
couldn't really do justice to a place, so I made up my own town, so no one can challenge me with it. And yeah, so this is the town. And then I was really fascinated by all these stories of sweets shops. And, there have been many people who have migrated, of course, from Pakistan after 1947 and set up their businesses here. And some of them have been these traditional Lahori sweet shops. And this idea really fascinated me. People bringing back their traditions, how they used to live, to this country when they started a new life here. And I thought that, hey, it'll be nice to write about a person coming back with a secret ingredient and marketing it and then making his laddus famous. And of course, then there's the romance, which is the third theme between
Sure.
Tara and Niku. And I just sort of like married them together and built up this adventure romance
Okay.
book.
Let's come to the characters themselves. So obviously, all of the characters are quite distinct from each other.
Mhm.
And I think, you've also said previously that you kind of want to have a vicarious experience, like just living through your protagonist. So
Yeah.
tell me a little bit about that and how you kind of created the rest of your characters.
So, yeah, I've said this and I'll say it one more time that this book is me living through Tara, because Tara's going on this great adventure with her BFF crush. And it's just this, it's just, I think it's just one way that writers live out their fantasies is by writing it out. Because I would love to go on an adventure like this one. And the way that I build these characters is like, okay, it's not one person that I've met in my life, but a synthesis of different people that I've met. And it's just something that I would love to do, so I made my characters do it. Of course, my character is not like me. Tara is like this super cool girl, great at maths. I'm terrible at maths. um but yeah, I think it's really cool that as writers you get, as a writer you get to live a second life, you because you can somehow live through what you create. I bet J.K. Rowling lived through Hogwarts in a way that we never will, because it's her own creation.
So if there are any writers who are watching this interview, I know how important is it for them to just go out and meet a lot of people? Because you said you did, that meeting people, you were able to kind of put your characters together. It helped in some way, right? So what kind of
Mhm.
advice would you have to maybe a budding writer?
Yeah, definitely. Like, of course, if you want to write, you have to be a good observer. You have to talk to a lot of people. You see how they move their heads. You see what are the kind of things that they say. Uh, Carry a notepad with you all the time. Jot it down. So, this is something that I do a lot. I even note down people's jokes. And I feel bad because I can never like repay them in that way. Like, hey, you said this thing and I'm gonna use it for like my own gain, but I do try to just acknowledge it somehow. But yeah, of course it's important to be in as many different situations as possible, to get as much exposure as you can, to meet many people, because to be a good writer you have to be someone who watches, who listens all the time with sincerity. because your characters can't be these flat, perfect
Hmm.
people. They are like the humans around us, and they have to be flawed. They have to be fun. They have to be embarrassed. They have to be doing stupid things like
They
you
have to
do
be
in your
human.
life.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
So where does it go from observation into writing? So what I mean is, in terms of your writing style, how did you,
Mhm.
turn your observations into descriptions of people? How did you start describing their behaviors, maybe their
Mhm.
quirks, their eccentricities? So how did that kind of come into your own style of writing?
So I think that's a skill that really develops over time. Like I've been writing for a long time, and I can tell you for sure that the stuff that I wrote in the beginning or like some years ago was terrible. Like they didn't feel like real characters, or they were real characters, but they weren't really doing that much in a story. It's a story which was going nowhere. It didn't really make that much sense, and you wouldn't really want to read it. Like I would like go back and read some of my old stuff and be like, ew, oh my god, I wrote that, it's terrible, I would never want to show it to anyone. But I think it's a little skill building that comes along as you evolve as a person as well as a writer. That's why I feel really funny when there are like these 12 or 13-year-old kids who write these books and they are published, because I didn't know anything when I was 12. Like, I didn't know how to turn my observations into my writings. I could barely like walk straight without
Mm.
falling down. So yeah, it's like it it needs a lot of skill. This is something I struggle with as well, characterization, because for example, I have a sheet of paper, and I look at my character Tara, and I see, yeah, she's a girl, she's 23, she's great at maths, and she like whatever, she makes these laddus. But what else? Like, how else can I make it more appealing and more real for the people who are reading the story? So I sit down to write all the quirks that I know of all the people around me. For example, let's say my friend Sajili, who is always on the phone or who's always singing weird songs. Like, you have to pick out these characteristics of different people that you know in your life and see what fits in your character that you're trying to characterize. And slowly, after maybe weeks, you arrive at someone who is more real than what you thought of at first. And there is a point while writing where your characters just come alive. They take a life of their own. You don't have to work on them anymore because they're already round and real enough for them to lead the story, and you just have to
Mm.
follow. Like, you don't really have to work that hard then.
So, creating characters is one thing, and creating and building situations is another thing. So, you've told me about characters, but how do you approach, the art of building a situation that actually allows a person's character to, kind of display itself?
Yeah, that's again, I think that's even harder than making characters. And as I said, that when I started to write, I had a character, I had things that I wanted them to do, but I had no story. Like, I would be done with 100 pages and see that nothing has changed in this person's life whatsoever. They've done this, but it doesn't really add up to being a story. So I think starting out with a great concept is really, really important if you're writing a story. For me, in this book, the plot was right there. It was
Hmm.
about the secret ingredient of these sweets, and it's the quest to find that ingredient. So now, once I have the quest in place, like, okay, there are some things that the characters will have to do to reach the ingredient. So I have to create a bunch of different situations where they might be in danger, which might bring them closer together as people, where they are under some kind of threat. So, of course, then I have to like brainstorm and think like, how can they be in
Hmm.
danger? Then I look back on my own life, try to write down experiences that I've had that I can use,
Yeah.
and not just my own. Maybe look at my friend's life, my family's life. I don't know, someone who has been kidnapped, or just try to talk to to them. And that's the funny thing, like this book mentions, like they go through these different cities, and they go to Agra, Mathura, Ludhiana, Bareilly. I've never been to Bareilly, I've never been to Ludhiana, but I spoke to a friend who lives in Bareilly, who grew up there. So I asked her, like, what kind of life
Hmm.
did you have when you were growing up there? Did you have this haveli full of ghosts, or did you have, I don't know, how would you spend your days? And she told me, oh, when we had this theater where they would go to watch movies, they would serve three-course meals inside the
Wow.
cinema hall.
Okay.
And that's crazy. Like, that's something I never knew. No one I know knows
Yeah.
about this, that you could be served three-course meals. But since I asked that, I can use it in my story and just like fire up my imagination, add my own stuff to it.
Sure. I think I need to find out where the cinema is and definitely pay it a visit.
Yeah.
So, you told me about how you put characters in situations. Now,
Mhm.
without spoiling the end of the story, without spoiling anything about the magic ingredient, I want you to tell me, did you already have the ending in place when you wrote the story, or did it kind of happen as the story went on?
No, no, I didn't have the end in place, and it was scaring me that I'm going forward, but I still don't know what the magic
Okay.
ingredient is. And I would say that when I start to write out a story, I know about like 30 to 40% of what's going to happen, and I don't know fully like what's where the story will lead, and it kind of just comes up as I write. But I definitely didn't know the end. I had to work really hard at it. My sister nudged me forward and gave me some important hints, like what it should be. But to know it, of course, you will have to read the book.
Yeah. So, Srishti, coming to your inspirations, who are some of the people that you look up to and you try to take inspiration or influence from their style of writing?
Well, I'm a really big Harry Potter fan, and J.K. Rowling, of course. Like, I feel that she's built a world that all of us for the rest of our life will try to compete with. Like, I cannot imagine writing something so detailed and so wonderful as that. So that's, of course, something that I always look at, that this is what I want to write one day in my life, whenever that may be. But there's loads of Indian writers that I love as well. This Chitra Banerjee, she's fantastic. I love. I just recently read the Kingkiller Chronicles by Patrick Rothfuss, and I love the fantasy world that he creates. I think real in like the people you know in real life inspire you way more than the people that you might not have met or might have just like read about. Yeah, I really like people who work hard and like chase their dreams, and they constantly inspire me to do the same. And yeah, my father, of course, like I really wish that I could be like half as good as he is at doing the things that he does.
Okay. The writers you mentioned, when you read them, right, how much of
Mm-hmm.
it is just getting lost in the world that they have created? And how much of it is actually thinking to yourself that, hey, this could be useful when I'm trying to write my own book?
So I think that it's when you read as a reader. It's really hard to read as a writer, and if you're doing that, you have to do it really consciously, because you have to read it and think, okay, why he wrote it like this and not that? What
Hmm.
was the choice? Why did he create it like this? And when you're reading, you're so immersed in the story that you forget to notice the certain writing choices that the writer chose to make. So I would say that it's really hard to delineate like this, but if you read a lot on a subconscious level, good writing really helps you become a good writer. So that's why we say to people, if you want to write, read a lot. And like apparently there are people saying stuff like, I've never read anything but I love to write, which is not possible. It's just bullshit, because what do you write for if you don't read? Like, it's just one more object you don't use because you don't read books. So, yeah, I feel that subconsciously reading will teach you plotting, characterization, all these techniques and tools that you need for the trade. But consciously, you may not even know that you're learning it because you're so immersed in the story and you're so much following the character's life and what they're
Hmm.
doing.
So this is more to do with fiction, right? So I understand you also do write non-fiction in the form of articles for a bunch of
Yes.
popular global publications as well. So what would you say, would be the difference when it comes to fiction versus non-fiction in terms of
Yeah,
the way
yeah.
you go about it?
It's really different because, of course, nonfiction is completely relying on facts. Like, you can tell these facts creatively and in a fun way and in a really engaging manner, but at the end you have to stick to the facts, you have to stick to the quotes. You can't really make something up. And that's something that I realized when I was writing my first book. It's called Once Upon a Curfew, and it's set during the emergency in 1975 in India. And I had to do like these two kinds of research. One was this factual research, which was like finding out what exactly happened in the time. So I can't really push the boundary of that because these are the things that happen, and I have to base my story within those facts.
Sure.
Um, yeah, and writing nonfiction is just different because I feel that somehow you're just like limited by these facts, and I do enjoy that obviously, but fiction is my game because I feel I can just bend it any which way that I want.
Mm.
I can literally live through it, live through the fantasy, and with nonfiction, I actually have to do that first and then write about it.
Yeah, yeah. And fiction actually is becoming pretty popular now that more people are working from home and they have more time to themselves. They finally have time to read the book that's been lying around for months, or
Yeah,
maybe even
yeah,
pick up some new books
yeah.
online. So what is your sense of the market and the industry for fiction? What in what direction is it moving? What do you expect? Is going to be the
Mhm.
demand from readers in the next few months?
Looking at the bestseller list, everyone knows that nonfiction sells more than fiction. That's not a surprise. People really like to go for these motivational, like Think and Grow Rich type of
Yeah.
books, is like which is expected in a country like India. Like, people are constantly trying to grow, give wings to their ambitions. So it's not surprising. I'm not a big nonfiction reader, though. I prefer fiction, and the kind of fiction that works in India is definitely romance and mythology. If you look at the bestseller
Yeah.
list, so there's Amish and there's Sujoy Datta, who's a romance writer. These are people who are always on the top 10 any given day. I do have a feeling that there are a lot of the readership is really inspired by these stories of people like somehow overcoming hurdles in their life, even in fiction. So
Mm.
there are stories like Savi Sharma and Preeti Shenoy. They are always accepted well by people. But personally, I really enjoy, as I said, like Manju Kapoor, Chitra Banerjee, Kamala Markandia, women writers who really help document female voices. And I enjoy seeing how regular people live, the concerns they have, and that's what I try to do with Lalan Sweets as well, although in a more extraordinary and adventurous way.
Yeah, like as more and more of India gets access to the internet, more people are moving towards video as a platform.
Hmm.
So at least on video, I definitely see fiction kind of becoming extremely popular, whether it's the popular streaming services that we know, or
Yeah,
some of the other services that people even in tier 2 and tier 3 cities use.
yeah.
So what would you say about that? What do you think is the scope for writing fiction
Mhm.
for a video first format?
Yeah, I think that's totally true because as these streaming services are really growing, I think a lot of books are being adapted into films as well, and it's a great way for the author to earn money from their books as well. There are like so many of these adaptations which like you can already see on Netflix or Hotstar or whatever,
Yeah.
like Sacred Games, A Suitable Boy, which just come out with BBC. So yeah, there is a great demand for content. There is a great demand for good stories, and I think foremost is having a good concept in place. So if you're going to write fiction, things can always be edited, made better. Characters can always be made stronger. But if you don't start out with a good concept, it's hard to find a home for that story. And these production houses are also looking out for good concepts to um, develop. And yeah, I really think that it's really growing a lot, as you said. I mean, you can just see from the TikTok ban that people are so upset, and I like people love
Yeah.
making videos and acting out like being someone else that they're not. And this is the same thing, like it's being someone else that you're not. And when you read fiction, you're escaping in a world that's not your own, and a lot of the times it's a relief.
And is that something that's on your horizon somewhere? Do you ever maybe not now, but maybe in the future, like plan to write content for video? Or if not, what are some of your other future plans that you have in store? I think you're working
I
on a
mean,
third
I'm
book already.
yeah, I am. Like, I don't know. I feel that I'm such a book writer that I wouldn't really like. I wouldn't mind trying it. But I love to play with descriptions and dialogues and have it all together as opposed to a script. But why not? Like, life's too short to say no to
Yeah.
anything. And yeah, I am working on a third book, and I hope it
Any
will
details
be.
that you're allowed to share about the book?
Yeah, sure. It's set in the 1940s. Again, going back
Okay.
in history during the British Raj, and it's a plot to overturn the Raj.
Okay.
So yeah, I feel that history is a great inspiration.
That sounds amazing, Srishti. Thank you so much for joining
Thank
us
you.
once again. It's been awesome
Thank
speaking
you.
to you. I think a lot of writers who are going to watch this will have a lot of useful insights to take away. Thank you
I'm
so much,
glad. Thank
Srishti.
you.
Yeah,
Yes, thank you.
great talking to you.